The rain fell hard on the metal plains of Zareth Prime, hissing as it struck the heated ground. From orbit, the sky glowed faint red evidence of the first bombardment. People whispered it was the beginning of the war no one thought would happen. It was not a war between empires or a rebellion of the oppressed. It was something much stranger. It was a war that began with a single human ship crossing a line no one dared to cross. The Galactic Council had always kept Earth at arm's length. They allowed humans into trade networks, science exchanges, and cultural meets, but never into the deeper alliances. They told the other species it was because humans were too unpredictable, but that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was whispered in war rooms, spoken only behind sealed doors. A reason that terrified even the most powerful fleets. No one dared to provoke humans because their weapons made victory meaningless. Now, standing in the command trench, Commander Veyran of the Caliph Dominion stared through his visor at the incoming blips on the horizon. The enemy was human. That alone made his throat dry. Reports from the first engagement had already reached him, an entire battalion gone in less than 4 minutes. No survivors. The attack had not been messy. It had been clean, precise, and terrifyingly efficient. The humans didn't seem to be fighting for territory or pride. They fought like they wanted it over as fast as possible. Beside him, Lieutenant Zareth shifted uncomfortably, her tail flicking in nervous bursts. "They're still an hour away," she said, but her voice betrayed no relief. An hour was nothing. She had seen the recon footage. Small human vehicles, rolling machines of black steel, had moved through the enemy front like water-cutting stone. No explosions for spectacle, no wasted shots. Only targets, one by one, each destroyed with chilling accuracy. Why now? Veyran muttered. Why after all these years? Zareth didn't answer. She knew the rumors. That the humans never fought unless forced. That when they did fight, they ended things so completely that war itself became pointless. She had dismissed it once as myth, not anymore. Not after what she'd seen 3 nights ago when she reviewed the classified files from the Irathis skirmish. A single human destroyer had neutralized an entire fleet without a single shot wasted. No one even knew what some of their weapons looked like, because they left nothing behind to study. The wind carried the faint tremor of movement. Not just the vehicles, but something heavier. Veyran's visor adjusted automatically, zooming on. The dust rising far ahead. Then he saw them. Dark shapes moving like predators in the open. The human tanks had no banners, no markings. Just the dull shine of armor scarred from battles the Dominion had never even heard about. Above them, small drones floated, scanning, relaying, marking targets with silent precision. He felt his claws dig into the rail of the trench. "They don't want this fight," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "They want to finish it before we even understand it started." The sky rumbled, not from thunder, from something higher. Shadows crossed the cloud's sleek craft, moving faster than his targeting systems could lock on. In the command channel, voices began to panic, feeding in reports of power grids shutting down, artillery going dead, targeting arrays turning useless. The humans hadn't fired on them yet. They were just turning everything off. Zareth's ears flattened. "They're not here to win," she whispered. "They're here to make sure we can't fight at all." The thought chilled Veyran more than any enemy charge. If they could shut down an entire planetary defense without a shot, then what chance did the Dominion have? His mind ran through old academy lessons, war histories, combat simulations, all of them built on the assumption that wars were long, costly, and required overwhelming numbers. The humans were rewriting every rule in real time. Then the comms went silent, all channels dead. Only the wind and the hiss of the rain remained. Veyran looked at his lieutenant. "Tell the others," he said, his voice low but sharp. "If you see a human weapon, don't try to destroy it. Don't even try to understand it. Just survive. But even as he said it, he knew survival might not be possible, not because the humans were cruel, not because they wanted to wipe them out, but because once the humans decided to fight, the fight itself ceased to exist. It became something else entirely, a demonstration, a warning, and a promise all at once. And somewhere far above, unseen by either of them, the human flagship adjusted. Its course, its weapons still cold, its systems quietly rewriting the fate of Zareth Prime. Asterisk, the trench felt colder now, though the rain had slowed. Commander Veyran kept scanning the horizon, but his visor showed nothing. The human tanks had stopped moving. That was worse than if they had kept advancing. It meant they were waiting for something. Waiting with a patience no battlefield commander liked to see. Lieutenant Zareth pressed 2 fingers to her earpiece, trying to pull in any signal, but the comms stayed dead. "It's like they've vanished," she said quietly. "No readings, no heat signatures. It's as if they're not even here anymore." Veyran's jaw tightened. "They're here," he said. "They're just not letting us see them." He remembered one of the reports he'd read before the war began. A single human squad on the planet Ravanus had disabled an entire planetary garrison in under 12 hours. Not through brute force, but through making the enemy blind, deaf, and unable to move. The soldiers had called it ghosting. The name fit. The Dominion soldiers in the trench grew restless. Without commands or targets, they shifted from foot to foot, claws scraping the mud. Some muttered that the humans had left. Others thought maybe they were preparing an airstrike. The truth was, no one knew. And that uncertainty was a weapon all on its own. A faint vibration hummed through the ground. It was not loud, it was not close. But every soldier felt it in their bones. The sound was steady, mechanical, and deliberate. Zareth's eyes narrowed. "It's not artillery," she said. "It's something heavier." Veyran lifted his visors. Magnification again, but the horizon was empty. No vehicles, no drones. Then he caught at a flicker of movement, a shimmer, like heat distortion in the cold air. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. They were cloaked. They're in position, Veyran said under his breath. And they're letting us know they're in position. It was psychological warfare, simple and devastating. Number. Need for speeches, no demands. Just a silent reminder that the humans were close enough to strike and confident enough to wait. From the west trench line, a flare shot into the sky. It wasn't from the Dominion. The flare was human-made, bright white with a faint blue pulse. Zareth frowned. "Is that a signal?" The answer came in the form of a sudden power surge. For a moment, the trench lights flickered back to life. Consoles blinked, and comm systems chirped. The Dominion soldiers rushed to their stations, thinking they had regained control. But when Veyran looked at his display, his stomach dropped. Every screen showed the same thing, a map of their own trench network, marked with glowing red dots. The humans had turned their systems back on just long enough to show that they knew exactly where everyone was. The lights went out again. A ripple of fear passed through the soldiers. Veyran knew what was happening. The humans were giving them a choice: surrender now, or wait for the strike. Zareth's voice was tight. They could have attacked already. Why are they waiting? Because they're not here for a fight, Veyran replied. They're here to make a point. And the longer we stand here, the clearer that point becomes. The rain started again, thin but icy. Somewhere far above, thunder rolled. Veyran suspected it wasn't thunder at all, but the sound of human ships shifting position. He imagined them up there, silent, invisible, armed with weapons the Dominion didn't even have names for. Without warning, the ground shook violently. Soldiers stumbled, grabbing for support. A plume of dirt and snow erupted less than 100 meters away. But there was no explosion sound, just a deep, low hum that made the air itself vibrate. When the dust cleared, the trench wall in that section was gone. Not blasted apart, simply gone, as if erased from existence. The soldiers stared in silence. Whatever the humans had used left no debris, no scorch marks. It was as though that section of wall had never been built. Zareth swallowed hard. What was that? Veyran shook his head. Something we'll never get to study. He knew the humans would never allow it. If they could remove a wall without damaging anything else, they could remove an army just as cleanly. Then the coms crackled to life for a single second. A voice, calm, unhurried, and unmistakably human, spoke one sentence. "Stand down. This is your only warning." And then the silence returned. The soldiers looked to Veyran, waiting for orders. But what could he say? If they fought, they'd be erased like that wall. If they surrendered, they'd live, but they would never hold their heads high again. This was the truth the galaxy hid. This was why no one fought the humans. They avoided war because winning was too easy. And yet, here on Zareth Prime, the Dominion was about to learn just how easy that win could be. The air in the trench was heavy, every breath tasting of metal and cold rain. Commander Veyran stood motionless, listening to the soldiers shift uncomfortably around him. No one wanted to be the first to speak, as if words might provoke the humans into moving faster. Zareth kept her gaze on the horizon, but her voice was low. "Do you think they're bluffing?" "No," Veyran said flatly. He had seen too many military bluffs in his career, and this wasn't one. Bluffs relied on fear of what might happen. The humans didn't deal in might. They dealt in certainty. Another vibration rolled through the ground. This one was different, shorter, sharper. The Dominion soldiers tensed, expecting the wall to vanish again, but nothing happened to the trench. Instead, in the distance, a massive plume of dust rose from a ridge where their artillery cannons had been stationed. Zareth's eyes widened. That was 30 kilometers away, Veyran nodded grimly. And they hit it without missing. He didn't need to check for survivors. There wouldn't be any. The soldiers murmured among themselves, voices growing shaky. The humans hadn't aimed for the trench. They had aimed for the one place the Dominion could have mounted a counterattack. The humans weren't just destroying weapons, they were removing options. The rain eased, leaving the battlefield eerily quiet. Then, from above, faint blue trails streaked across the clouds. They weren't missiles, they weren't drones. They were something faster, almost like streaks of light bending around the air. One by one, the Dominion's communication towers went dark. No fire, no smoke, just silence. Their command network was gone. Zareth's tail twitched. They're dismantling the war before it even begins. That's what they do, Veyran said. They don't fight battles. They erase them. The soldiers in the trench were losing discipline now. Some wanted to retreat to the secondary lines. Others whispered about abandoning the fight entirely. But there was nowhere to go. If the humans wanted them gone, they would be gone. Veyran closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the faces of commanders he had spoken to during War Council meetings. Every one of them had looked away when Earth was mentioned. They had warned him not to provoke humans, not to test their patience. At the time, he thought it was politics. Now he understood it was survival. The sky darkened. At first, he thought it was the weather. But as he looked up, he saw the outline of something massive, blocking the sunlight. The shape was too angular to be natural, too large to be anything but a ship. It hung there, silent and still, like a shadow cast by the gods. The ship didn't fire. It didn't move. It didn't need to. The message was already clear. If this trench resisted, that ship would end the resistance in seconds. Then, without warning, one of the soldiers in the trench broke. He dropped his weapon and climbed out, hands raised. "I surrender," he shouted into the open air. "Do you hear me? I surrender." No one moved to stop him. No one even called him a coward. They all understood. From somewhere unseen, a small drone appeared, gliding down like a silent bird. It scanned the soldier for less than a second before floating away, vanishing into the rain. The soldier was left standing, unharmed. Zareth exhaled slowly. They marked him. Veyran nodded. The humans had decided he was no longer a combatant. That meant he was safe. Safer than anyone still holding a weapon. More soldiers began to lower their rifles. The fear was spreading, not like a wildfire, but like ice, slow, inevitable, freezing their will to fight. A deep, mechanical voice came over the comms. It wasn't the same calm human voice from before. This one was lower, more final. You have seen our reach. You have seen our precision. Continue this war, and we will show you the end. The comms went silent again. Zareth's claws flexed. What now? Veyran looked at her, his voice heavy. Now we decide if we want to exist. Tomorrow. The truth weighed on them both. Humans didn't avoid war because they were merciful. They avoided it because war against them was pointless. The moment they committed, the outcome was already decided. And Zareth Prime was standing on the edge of that decision, somewhere deep. Inside, Veyran still wanted to fight. It was instinct, pride, and the duty of his command. But another part of him, the part that had seen what humans could do, was already wondering how to order a retreat without losing what little dignity they had left. Far above, the massive human ship shifted ever so slightly. It was waiting, and every soldier in the trench knew that, if it moved again, it wouldn't be to wait any longer. The trench felt like a cage now. Every soldier knew the humans could tear it apart at will. Commander Veyran kept his eyes on the massive ship above. Its shadow stretching for kilometers. It didn't have the aggressive posture of a vessel preparing to bombard. It simply floated, silent, like it owned the sky. Zareth broke the stillness with a whisper. They're making us wait on purpose. Yes, Veyran said. Waiting is part of the attack. The humans understood something few commanders did: fear was most effective before the first shot. Once blood was spilled, courage could rise again. But if you could freeze the enemy in hesitation, the fight was over before it began. A sudden shimmer rippled across the horizon. It looked like sunlight bending around invisible shapes. Slowly, massive structures emerged from the distortion machines. Taller than the trench walls, walking on legs as thick as armored pillars. They moved in perfect formation, each step measured, each movement in complete sync. No one had ever seen human warwalkers before. Rumors said they could crush fortified cities without firing a single round. The sight alone made soldiers drop their weapons. Zareth's voice was tight. How many do you count? Too many, Veyran replied. In truth, he had stopped counting after the first dozen. The walkers halted just outside weapons range. Then, without warning, panels on their sides opened. Long, sleek barrels extended not toward the trench, but toward the mountain range behind. There was no sound, no flash. Just a sudden moment where the mountain peak seemed to collapse inward. No explosion. No smoke, just a perfect cut, as if an invisible blade had sliced through solid rock. The top half of the mountain slid down in eerie silence before crashing into the valleys below. The shockwave never reached the trench. The humans had somehow destroyed the mountains without spilling the destruction onto the battlefield. It was not an attack. It was a message. Zareth's breathing quickened. That wasn't even aimed at us, Veyran nodded. Because they want us to imagine what it would look like if it was. The Dominion soldiers began backing away from the parapets, some moving toward the trench exits. None of them spoke. No one dared. The humans weren't rushing. Their tanks stayed hidden. Their drones hung like watchful predators. Their walkers stood like statues. They were letting the Dominion come to its own conclusion. Then, from the massive ship above, a different sound emerged, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated through the ground and into their chests. At first, Veyran thought it was some kind of weapon charging. But then he saw it. All along the trench, Dominion rifles, pistols, and heavy weapons were going dark. The power cells weren't depleted, they were gone, burned out without heat or fire. Zareth stared at the lifeless rifle in her hands. They just killed every weapon. Veyran set his own sidearm on the mud. It was useless now. They're ending the war without killing us. That was the moment the last thread. Offal broke in the trench. Soldiers began tossing their gear aside, some kneeling, some just standing there with empty hands. The fight was over. The humans had never fired a shot at them, yet they had taken everything that made them soldiers. A beam of light descended from the human ship, not blinding, not burning, just a narrow column that landed directly in front of the trench. From it stepped a single human figure in dark armor, helmet under one arm. The figure didn't raise a weapon. He simply walked forward, stopping just close enough for his voice to carry. "We told you once," he said, calm and clear. "This is your only warning." Veyran stood straighter, trying to hold on to some form of command presence. "Why spare us?" he asked. "Why not finish it?" The human looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because it's easier to show you than to kill you." And with that, he turned his back, turning his back to an armed enemy, something no soldier in history should have been able to do. But here, it was safe. No one would shoot. No one could shoot. The beam of light rose again, carrying him back to the ship. The walkers remained still. The message was complete. The next move was not the humans to make, it was the Dominions. Veyran didn't need to speak to his soldiers. They already knew. If they pushed forward now, they would be wiped from existence. If they stopped, they might live. The truth had nev asterisk. The trench was quiet now, but it wasn't peace. It was the quiet of soldiers who had seen enough to know the fight was already lost. The human ship still hung in the sky like a silent threat, its shadow unmoving over the battlefield. "Commander." Veyran stood near the station, waiting for the system to flicker back to life. The humans had cut power to their weapons, but it seemed they had left the long-range communication intact for now. The signal returned in a burst of static, followed by the sharp voice of High Command. "Veyran, report." He took a slow breath. "The humans have disabled all frontline weapons. Artillery is gone. Walkers remain in position, but have not fired on us directly. They have made their intentions clear." There was a pause, then the cold reply. "You are to resume the offensive. Reinforcements are inbound. Hold your position until they arrive." Veyran clenched his jaw. "With respect, High Command, reinforcements will not change the outcome." "The humans, Commander," the voice. "Cut in. Your duty is to the Dominion, not to your fear." He felt Zareth's eyes on him. She didn't need to say anything. The look on her face told him she had heard every word. "They don't understand," she said softly after the channel went silent. "They don't want to understand," Veyran replied. "If they admit the truth, they'll have to change everything. They believe about power." From the far end of the trench, a murmur spread. Veyran followed the soldier's gaze and saw the human walkers shifting. They weren't advancing, they were stepping aside. Through the gap, sleek vehicles rolled forward, carrying equipment unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. Zareth squinted. "What are they doing?" Veyran watched as the humans began erecting tall, thin towers directly in the no-man's land. They moved with machine-like coordination, finishing each tower in seconds. The devices hummed faintly, then projected shimmering barriers that stretched high into the air. "They're sealing the battlefield," Veyran said. "Not to keep us in, but to keep anyone else out." Minutes later, the reinforcements arrived. Over the ridge, Dominion heavy transports rumbled forward, their engines loud and defiant. But as they neared the barrier, each one sputtered and died. The crews jumped out, confused, trying to restart the machines. It was pointless. The humans had extended the same disabling field to everything within range. Zareth shook her head. "In disbelief, they're controlling the ground we stand on." and the sky above. Veyran turned to the soldiers nearest him. "Stay down, do not engage. If you want to live, you will follow my orders, not high commands." For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, weapons were set aside again. The human ship seemed to take note. A faint pulse of blue light ran along its underside. Like a nod of acknowledgement, the comms crackled again. High Command's voice was harsher this time. "Why are your troops not advancing, Veyran? We see no enemy fire." "No, you don't," Veyran said evenly. "Because they don't need to fire. They've already won." "This is insubordination." He cut the channel. The silence that followed was heavier than before, but it felt like the only choice left. He looked at Zareth. "If Command wants to send someone else here, they can. I'm not marching my soldiers into a demonstration meant to end us." One of the younger soldiers stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Commander, why are they letting us live?" Veyran didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted back to the mountain range, now missing its peaks. "Because killing us would teach nothing, but showing us what they can do without killing, that will spread faster than any victory parade." Above, the human ship shifted again. This time, a series of smaller craft detached from its underside. Descending like silent hawks, they didn't land. Instead, they circled the Dominion positions, each releasing a brief pulse of light. Every Dominion soldier felt it at once, a strange warmth in their chests, followed by a faint vibration under their skin. Medical scanners later would reveal nothing, but everyone understood. The humans had tagged them somehow. They could be found anywhere, anytime. Zareth touched her chest, unsettled. "They want us to remember this feeling," Veyran nodded. "And to know that if we ever try again, they'll know before we do." The walkers stepped back into their cloaked positions. The barriers began to fade. The human ship remained in the sky, still watching. The war wasn't over. But the Dominions, will to fight, it was gone. The battlefield no longer felt like a place for war. It was too quiet, too still. The human ship floated above like a monument in the sky, unshaken by wind or rain. In the trench, Commander Veyran stood among soldiers who no longer held weapons. Their eyes were on him, waiting for the next order. But he knew there was only one order left to give. "Hold your positions," he said, voice low. "Do nothing unless they move first." The humans moved, but not with weapons. The massive ship began to descend slowly, its shadow covering more of the ground. The air pressure shifted, making everyone's ears ache. The ground vibrated in a steady rhythm, not from engines, but from something deeper, as if the earth itself was responding to the ship's presence. A section of the ship's underside opened, revealing a long black structure that glowed faint blue. It didn't look like a gun. It looked like a piece of technology far older and far more advanced than anything the Dominion had ever seen. Zareth's voice was tense. "What is that?" Veyran didn't answer. He wasn't sure. The blue light spread outward, a thin sheet sweeping over the trench, then across the entire valley. There was no heat, no pain, but the effect was instant. Every active device, every powered machine, every scrap of technology went dark. Watches, scanners, even the simplest lights were dead. Veyran realized the truth. They just shut down the planet. From the ridge, the Dominion reinforcements watched in stunned silence as their transports, weapons, and comms all failed. The humans weren't disabling an army anymore. They were disabling a world. Then, through the dead comm systems, a voice filled the air. It wasn't transmitted by radio. It was everywhere at once, in every mind, in every ear. Calm, clear, without emotion. "This is not your planet anymore." The words were not a threat, but a statement. Veyran stepped forward, not knowing if the voice could hear him. "If you can do this, why haven't you already taken everything?" The voice answered instantly, "Because we do not need to take. We only need to remind." The blue light retracted back into the ship. Slowly, power returned to the planet. Lights flickered. Engines coughed back to life. Weapons, however, remained useless. The ship hovered in silence for a few more moments. Then, small drones began, releasing objects into the air, thin metallic discs that glowed faintly. They floated down into the trenches, the ridges, even the cities beyond the battlefield. Zareth picked one up cautiously. It was smooth, warm, and etched with strange markings. As soon as she touched it, a holographic image appeared above it, a projection of the mountain range collapsing, the trench weapons going dark, the human ship blotting out the sky. It was a record of everything they had just witnessed. "They're giving us proof," Zareth whispered. Veyran understood now. This wasn't just for them. These recordings would spread. Every soldier, every civilian, every official in the Dominion would see exactly what happened here. And they would remember, the humans didn't want territory. They didn't want resources. They wanted certainty that the Dominion would never try again. Above, the massive ship began to rise, climbing higher until it was only a dark silhouette against the clouds. Its escorts hidden until now flickered into view for a moment, revealing dozens more ships of similar size before vanishing back into their cloaked positions. Zareth exhaled, her shoulders finally sagging. "It's over," Veyran shook his head slightly. "No, wars end when both sides agree to stop. This is different. This is a lesson." The last sound from the human ship came not as words, but as a single tone, deep, resonating, and final. And then it was gone, vanishing into the upper atmosphere without a trace. The battlefield was left in silence. Once again, Veyran looked at the soldiers around him. They were still standing, still breathing, but none of them would ever look at war the same way again. The Dominion had been shown what many in the galaxy already knew. Humans avoided war not out of weakness or kindness, but because there was no challenge in it for them. High Command would rage, would deny, would try to spin the events. But it would be pointless. The discs would tell the truth. And the truth would travel faster than any fleet. Zareth turned to him. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" Veyran stared at the empty sky. "Only if we're foolish enough to make them." The soldiers began to pack their gear, not as victors or as prisoners, but as witnesses. They had survived something most armies never got the chance to see twice, and as they marched away from the trench, leaving the battlefield untouched, the shadow of the human ship lingered in their minds. A shadow that would follow the Dominion for generations, because the galaxy's secret was no longer a secret.